Hello, you are listening to the Musicking Community, the podcast that explores and celebrates the role of music and musicians in the context of local communities wherever they might be. I'm Heather Niemi Savage, composer, collaborative pianist, music teacher, and your host of the Musicking Community. Thanks for listening. Whether you are an avid listener of classical music or someone who is just curious, whether you are a classical musician or part of an organization that presents classical music, you need the Live Music Project. In this episode, I continue my conversation with Megan Ihnen, who is the current executive director of the Live Music Project. You will find out how you can find the classical music concerts you want to go see, how you can list your own concerts in the calendar, and how you can support your local community's music scene by becoming a remote volunteer. Listen and find out why Live Music Project is vital to the future of classical music and our communities. You are listening to episode number 17. Talking about people who are having meaningful connections with the music and specifically with live music, I think is a great time to segue into another major project that you're involved in, which is the Live Music Project.
Yes.
That's so gigantic. I looked at the website and I'm like, wow, these are big goals.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us what the Live Music Project is and, how it got started and what you do with it.
Sure. So I am the current executive director for the Live Music Project, which started as a concert calendar in the Seattle area. It was founded by my friend and amazing colleague, Shia Lyon. And so Shia moved to Seattle from New York City, and she started to realize that there were all of these ensembles, like orchestras and things like that. She wanted to go to classical music. She wanted to go hear a piece in particular. I'll tell you about that in a minute, but she wanted to go hear a piece, and she realized that she was like starting to Google, and she was just like finding a wealth. There's like close to like 40 community orchestras in Seattle, and people don't know that it's like there is this huge wealth of like ensembles and things like that happening in Seattle. But she was like, well, how do people find out about this? So when you Google, you end up on Seattle Symphony or Seattle Opera, but you maybe don't find all of these other ensembles that are doing things. And because she comes from a product management, like tech background and journalism, she's really like, her brain thinks about surfacing information, right? How do people find this? So she would end up on an orchestra's website, and she would look at the season. It was posted as like a JPEG on the website, but if Google can't read, like a search engine can't read the information that's on like an image like that. So Google doesn't know that they have Beethoven 5 coming up, like that's they're doing Festive Overture, whatever, so it can't read those things. So she started to just kind of piece it together, that she's like, oh, so many of these arts organizations that have they've got one staff person, right? Or they don't have it's all volunteers, right?
Right.
So many of these arts organizations are not completely served by technology tools. And she was like, well, I'm going to see if I can create this hub of information. So she built a concert calendar in Seattle for classical music, early music, classical music, contemporary classical music. Think of it as kind of like a very large classical music umbrella. And just Shia is that kind of unicorn personality that just brings people to her. So like people just kept like joining her, and like she knew people in tech and she knew people in the arts. And so volunteers kept like coming out and helping to add concerts to the calendar, and like technology folks were like volunteering to help with like building the technology so that over time, live music project, so we, became a 501(c)(3), and we like built year after year after year, that in 2021 we launched our own technology that we built for the concert calendar, which made it national, international. So you can be anywhere in the world and
Mm.
add your concerts to the live music project calendar. Because we're still a very small team, we have focus cities, and that means that that's where we kind of have our volunteers work to build out a comprehensiveness. So Seattle, Portland, Oregon, New York City, Washington, D.C., plus Baltimore and Atlanta, our volunteers kind of work to help build out a comprehensiveness so that there's lots of events on the calendar in those areas so that people realize it's like an ongoing thing.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
the reason I brought up that kind of Google can't read it is that because the way that we built our technology is that we have incredible SEO, right? So Google reads it and can find anything. So if people are searching for, they want to go hear a certain piece, then they find the live music project. And once they come to our calendar, you can search by composer, piece title, style, instrument. You can search by BIPOC composers if you want to go hear more composers, of color, right? You can search by all sorts of things. You can search by family friendly concerts or free concerts. You can search by movie scores. You can search by, all sorts of things. So that sense of surfacing information so that anybody who's interested can go find it versus having to like get 6 pages deep on Google before you're
Right,
like, oh, this orchestra that's literally going to play 2 blocks from me, it's like,
right.
but you would have never found it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, Heather, you would probably agree with me that we are in classical music, we're in music, and we still don't find out about events sometimes.
It astounds me. It
Right.
astounds me. Like when I was living in Rhode Island, I think in the last 6 months we were there, I learned about, 4 or 5 different ensembles that were within a half an hour of where I lived. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I've never heard of you. And,
Right. And you are a
they have a
professional
social media
musician.
page, and I'm like, and I'm a classical musician. I'm interested in
Yeah.
what you offer, and the algorithm is not showing you to me. I
Hmm.
was absolutely shocked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Right.
that's how it is. It's ridiculous.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you brought up the algorithm because live music project. So some people ask, oh, like why do you have it as like a website, or why do you have it as a tool, or why do you focus on classical music? And mostly because a lot of technology tools are focused on more commercial areas of
Mhm.
music, right? And
Yeah,
so we could talk about like Ticketmaster and stuff like that all day long, but
right.
but we do not have the same number of technology tools that focus on this particular area of music. Doesn't
Hmm.
mean that it's better or anything, but it tells you what you're going to find there, right? And it puts a little like mile marker that says, hey, come over here if you want to find this in your community that's not based on the algorithm, that's not saying like, oh, you said that you liked this, this piece, so now you're only going to hear about these kinds of things, right? It's for you to explore. And a lot of what I was going to say about the algorithm is we don't often know how much is being limited from what we see based on the algorithm. We feel like, oh, it's showing me all these things that I want to see, but we don't realize that there's actually a lot more beyond that that we don't see because of those things. And as social media platforms are trying to figure out how to monetize and be profitable, they're going to point more and more things towards advertising. And if you're talking about arts organizations that have a shoestring budget, then you're definitely not going to find out about them. But they're putting that whole budget into the art making, So they've got great concerts, but they're not spending their hard-earned resources on marketing. They're not spending it on like social media advertising. So Live Music Project is an advocacy organization
Right.
that surfaces information like that. So it's like a place where people can go to search for concerts based on their interests, and also for arts organizations and individuals of all sizes, right? All budget sizes. So your legacy organizations that have been around and they're like, they have the biggest budgets in town, and individual musicians with zero budget, they
Mm,
all show up on the same calendar. They
yeah.
all show up and you can pick what you want to go to.
Yeah.
And
So
so, mhm,
how do the organizations get their concert on the calendar?
sure. So to submit a concert to the calendar, you create a very, very easy, quick account on the site, and then you just go to submit a concert. You fill out the information with your concert details, and then we have a staff member who checks every single concert to make sure there's no spam on the
Oh, yeah.
calendar. So you'll never find anything like spam on, like you kind of see sometimes with like community calendars or something like that,
Right.
that if you're in town, it's like the calendar that has everything from like the bacon festival to like, this garage sale on it or whatever,
Right.
is that there are still real people checking those details for a live music project on our inside. And then you submit your concert details and it goes up on there. So it's free. It's never, you're never going to be charged for it. There's no, expenses for that side of it. Because it's a community driven calendar. So you just submit. So arts organizations, individual musicians, any composers, if you have something coming up where but then the arts organization isn't submitting it, you can go ahead and submit your own concerts. It doesn't have to come from one person. You can submit those so that you can point people towards it and help draw that. The point that I want to make and why, I kind of share that like SEO information is because we have this concert calendar and we have over 120,000 annual users, right?
Mm,
This is a classical music website that is having over 120,000 annual users to find out concert details. That is unheard of. Nobody else is like having 120,000 visit their concert calendar, right? So this is an area where people, because of just understanding how technology works and making sure that we're surfacing the information in a way that Google's like, oh, then it points people to us all the
right.
time. Do
They
you
say,
want to
oh,
find?
this is important.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
because it's like constantly being updated, there's so much information that it looks very like Google checks it all the time. So it's like that kind of, we don't have that in other concert calendars or, uh, around the country. We don't have that on other classical music websites because it doesn't have the same amount of like constant updating that's happening, which
Right.
tells the internet at large that this is a very popular site and people need to know
Yes.
about it. There's constant like new information. So check it a lot, right?
So it's quite possible that an organization could get more hits on their concert from Live Music Project's website than their own website.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So it it
So
it,
yeah,
it is it behooves an organization to get your concerts on
yes.
Live Music Project.
Yes. Thank you, Heather. Yes. Well, and also send out weekly digests of concerts that are coming up in that area. So in the focus cities that I was talking about, we have the option for people to sign up and get a weekly email that says like, hey, here's all the concerts coming up in your area, which means that people who have an interest in classical music, but maybe they're not on your specific email list,
Right.
they are on our email list and they will find out about, they could see, they see your concert coming up, right? So it's really one of, it's an additional step. Obviously, we have our own websites, we have our own calendars, we have our own email lists that we're sharing that information to. But what's the next level? What's that next tier where you're getting in front of people who have a vested interest? They said, I like classical music, but they don't know about you yet. They don't know about your,
And you don't know about them. Right?
yep.
So the
And
organization,
so,
they don't know about the organization doesn't know about them.
yeah,
And this is like
exactly.
a giant networking.
Yes. And so that's where this, as a classical music advocacy organization, where we're helping the field and we're really working towards advocacy for classical music scenes around the
Mm.
country, right? We're like,
Yeah.
the work that we do surfaces information so it's easier for listeners to find you, right? To do that kind of thing on a broader scale, right? So it's everybody's benefiting in the scene from all of us showing up on the concert calendar. Everybody's benefiting in the scene when we have an audience development tool called Spontaneous Free Tickets. Everybody's benefiting in the scene when we are offering free tickets to come to performances, especially for people who have barriers to access because of cost,
Right.
or they've never tried classical music before. And so it's a lot easier for them to go and try it once, see if they like it, if they've won tickets.
Right. Right.
So if they win tickets, then they're a lot more willing to go try something for the first time than go, oh, each ticket, even if your tickets are $18, right?
Yeah.
If each ticket is $18, but you're like, you have to buy two of them, you're going to go with a friend, you're going to go with somebody you care about, then having like those two tickets might be just enough to go, well, I'll try it next time. I'll try it next time.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and it doesn't mean they're not interested. It just means that that familiarity bias means that they're like just a little less willing to put it out there. If they win tickets, they're like, well, let's go do it.
Right.
And then a lot of those people sign up for the email list for that organization after they go. They're like, oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
And we could talk about that more. Spontaneous Free Tickets is one of our programs that I'm super, super passionate about. Um, so we have a new platform. Like I said, we're a technology company, so we build all of our own tech. We have a new platform that's going to be like unveiled very soon. So I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. Like when all of the things that you've been doing in a very, very manual way are suddenly like automated, and you're like,
Oh, wow.
so exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to kind of see how that program grows, especially after this new platform gets unveiled. Then we get to grow and have so many more organizations involved with it, because Spontaneous Free Tickets has been Seattle only
Oh,
since it
yeah.
started. And once we're able to handle more giveaways because of the platform and things like that, then we can run it in lots of different places,
Right.
lots of different giveaways. So that's always exciting. We were talking about that accumulation of like, you have to start a project, even like getting it going in a manual way, or you got to start a thing, and then you just keep building onto it over time.
Right.
And
Right.
then and then like seeing it have a real impact. Spontaneous Free Tickets, let's see here, since it was started, I think in 2014-ish, um, since it started, we've distributed like over $200,000 in free tickets,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So like
Awesome.
those are, yeah. So when you think about, yeah, when you first do it, you're distributing like two tickets at $20, right? There's like $40. In that first year, you're only you're only doing this much. But then when you just keep doing those things consistently and just keep building onto it in that fashion, then you start to then you really start to see the impact of it.
Mm.
And that's kind of how I feel about the calendar too, is community driven doesn't mean very much if only one person is driving it. Like
Right.
if only one person is being the community.
Yeah.
So it works when thousands of us are adding our concerts and like just taking that little bit of time to be like, oh, here's a step that I can take that helps me connect with more people in my community.
Right. So I imagine that part of the work is getting this out and letting organizations know
Yeah.
about live music projects so that they can sign up and get their concerts on
Yes.
the calendar. How do you do that? What's your approach to getting the word out?
Well, one of them is coming on podcasts like this, Heather. One of them is like, is brand awareness in media, is cover it, when we have conversations and we tell people like this is what it is, and getting in front of all sorts of different groups of our community to just be like, hey, this is available to you. You can sign up, you can contribute your concerts, you can put that on the calendar. And a big part of that is also that we have volunteers who also focus on helping us, especially those organizations that are small budget or very small staffs. They don't have a dedicated marketing person. Our volunteers also help to kind of look holistically at all these organizations in a community and try and like get more of their concerts. So they're just individuals like you and me who care about classical music, and they're just copying, pasting, and editing, like, and just adding concert details from organizations around them in their community that help fill out the calendar. So you start to see more and more people using it. And that's that kind of circuit that happens, is like when we have dedicated people who decide, I'm going to help volunteer for this, right? I'm going to help get it going. And then more information shows up on the calendar, more people come to the calendar. And so then you see more people using it. That helps to tell people, wow, look at how powerful this is. Right. And so arts organizations see, oh my gosh, there's a huge benefit when we put it on our own website, but then we also add it to this calendar, because then other people are finding it. People that we didn't know, are using this.
Right.
And finding us and coming to the concerts.
And sometimes even outside of what they would consider their region, or like maybe like you might think, I have a performance coming up in Raleigh in September, and Raleigh is about 2.5 hours from me.
Yeah.
Chances are there might be marketing to people in Raleigh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But somebody like me might be willing to drive a couple of hours for a certain thing. Or like when I lived in Rhode Island, it was not uncommon for me to drive 2 hours to see something in Boston.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't hear about it because I'm outside of what they might consider their marketing area,
Yeah.
So something, the live music project could, help get word out to people beyond their area. So.
And one of the things I talk about is a lot of times, like if you were going to go, say, because I know, Heather, you go to conferences, you go to things like you're going to go hear your piece get performed somewhere. You're going to be in town there, but then you're going to your concert, but maybe you want to go to something else.
Right.
So you could you go to Live Music Project and you're like, what else is happening around me? Maybe I want to go to a concert the next night, because you're there for your own music life. I would imagine you're like, I'm not going to do it every single time I'm on the road, but if you had a concert in Seattle and then you're like, you know what, I'll go to somebody else's concert and then meet some people, do some networking and community building, go hear some other composers' pieces while I'm there. How often do I get to be up here? Then a tool like Live Music Project is exactly the thing that you were looking for. You're like, I want to go I don't know this community super well, so instead of having to go like put it out on social media, maybe I just don't know that many people that know Seattle very well. But then you have a tool where you can just go and find these, something to check out. And I think so great. I have an example that I really love, which is a performer colleague friend of mine who lives on the East Coast, was doing a tour around Seattle, and they are such a live music project like evangelist now because of this experience. They got booked to do this concert, and then they were like, okay, well, I want to build it out, so I'm not just going for one thing. And they found Live Music Project, and they looked around and they were like, oh, this basically tells me all of the venues, all of the organizations in this entire community. And they were like, you made my ability to pitch all sorts of organizations lickety split, right? And so they're like, we need this everywhere.
Yeah. I told John, I said that I looked at that calendar and now I know who all my guests for the podcast.
Yes. Yes.
I know
Yes.
the podcast. Yeah, that's awesome. So anybody listening to this could be a volunteer.
Absolutely. And so thank you for letting me just kind of let people know if you like this, all of our volunteering is remote. So you just do it from wherever you are at your computer. And so it could be synchronous with our calendar squad team, or it could be asynchronous. So if you're like, yeah, I could do it once a month or whatever, I would love to have people feel like they can they can contribute, they can volunteer like on their schedule. And it just is that way. If you're looking for a way to feel like I'm contributing to the health and success of like my classical music community, I've got one for you. Like I would love to invite you into this space.
Yeah. So we could all be like our, local, because one of the things too is that with the demise of newspapers,
Yes.
don't have the arts and entertainment sections, especially on a local level, to
Yes.
tell us what's happening. And so now Live Music Project can help fill that need. So we can all be our own local arts and entertainment reporter.
Yes.
To
Yes.
say, hey, this is what's happening this week
Yeah.
or this month or
Yeah.
and get it up on Live Music
Yes.
Project's calendar.
Yes.
Now, do you
And
have, okay, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, Heather, I every so often, and like, of course, this makes total sense. I am also this person, but I'll see like every 6 months or whatever, somebody start their own calendar for their area.
Yeah,
And and then I want to write to them and be like, I literally have the infrastructure for it. I just need the person, right? If
yeah,
you care about that, you don't have to pay your own hosting fees. You don't have to like make sure that the site is working, like all of that, like the technical side of it. I was like, I've got that taken care of. But if you would like to run or you want to be the person, if you were like, why doesn't my community have a calendar?
mhm,
I've I've got the tech for you. I just need more manpower. I just need more person power to like have this. So if that's ever been something where people feel like, oh, I want to start something like this, that's part of why I really love having these conversations is I can only tell so many people. I can only post it on my own Facebook like so many times, like that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to make your own website or pay the hosting fees or any of that kind of stuff. I got that part, but I desperately need you who care about your community to be like, oh yeah, I want to help. I'll commit some time to that. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So for the person who wants to help, do you
Mhm.
have any kinds of requirements about what concerts go up or um, the amount of time between the posting and the concert date that need to be followed?
We really keep it super open. So one of the things is obviously because concerts get checked by Soren before they go up on the calendar. We always want people to generally put their concerts up like 1 to 2 weeks before the concert because that's like the sweet spot for people looking for concerts, right? So if it happens within 48 hours, then you can't reach as many people. But that doesn't mean that we would ever turn it away, right? There's no like we don't stop you from doing like we wouldn't turn anybody down, right?
Yeah,
Um,
not the live music police.
absolutely not. And then when it comes to the part, because we are really like, remember, big umbrella classical music, early music through super experimental contemporary classical music, but we don't feature like jazz or world music or, hip hop or, like we keep the genre kind of big genre pillar kind of specific. So we just kind of, and we like, there's wiggle room for that kind of stuff. So if you feel like you're influenced by classical music and like classical music people would come to your concert, then put it on there, you know? That's the kind of stuff that, so, but it helps us tell listeners like what they can find on their site, on our site. So like, so that's how we kind of, that really broad umbrella sense of classical music is what you find on Live Music Project. And so there isn't a, there, so if you are looking to volunteer, no, if you wanted to volunteer for 30 minutes once a month or something, I'd love to have you. Like, I'd love to. And the, it's because it's remote, you can do it from wherever your computer is. Then I really think that this is one of those things that I love, just helping to talk people through like what looks like the right fit for you. Can you do it once a month? Can you do it once a week? Can you do it whatever? And 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 so we also, if you wanted to be part of our calendar squad, which is the volunteer like team that gets together every other Monday night, on Google Meet, right? So they do it remotely from wherever they are. So there's people all over the country that get together. And so we, for that, we also have lists of organizations. So you don't have to go find them all by yourself. You don't even have to know. So if you were like, I just want to help out in this area, you know, we probably have a list of organizations where we're like, hey, would you start looking at these places? And then like add them to this. So we, because we've been, I mean, this is what, this is our 10th year, like Live Music Project has been around. So we've gotten better at like, you know, making it super easy for people to get involved and having that kind of infrastructure so that if you want to, you don't have to come up with everything by yourself. You don't have to, you can just follow, you can follow a list, you can follow a plan, and in that way it feels like, you know, you can contribute, but you're not, I think a lot of people tell me that it feels it feels kind of like doing like jigsaw puzzles, like that kind of like flow that you get into when you're like just organizing information and stuff like that. Like it feels very like meditative is what is what my volunteers tell me. Like,
So how does someone sign up to volunteer?
sure. So we make it really easy to just come to the livemusicproject.org website. You can come to livemusicproject.org/volunteer. There's a form on that page. It just comes to me, and like you can say, oh, I'm interested in doing this thing, or you know, just tell me, you know, there's, if you fill that out, then I get in touch with you and we go from there. So it's really just come on over to the website and let me know that you're interested in being involved. You can even, if you, especially for anybody that's listening, Heather, if you're like, I'm interested, but not right now, not that now's not like an easy time to do it because I'm busy or whatever, you can tell me that you want me to follow back up with you in like 6 months. And I was like, I will. Don't worry. Like, so if you want to drop me a line and just be like, hey, I'm interested in this, but I don't know what that looks like. I'm no pressure. But if you tell me that you're interested, then I'm happy to follow back up with you. And you know, if you know that you're like, oh yeah, I might be moving houses right now or something like that, and like can't do it now, but catch me later, then I'm like, I'm happy to follow up.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because you know, I searched the website for my area and nothing came up.
Mhm.
And so I don't know how far out like from an area it goes. Like
Right.
because I know in like Charlotte, there's a lot of new music that's happening in
Mhm.
Charlotte, North Carolina. And last month I went over a couple of towns and got to see a string quartet perform. But I'm gonna guess that the Arts Council does not know about Live Music Project.
Uh,
So that would not have been on the calendar, I don't think.
we got to get a lot deeper, and that's, I mean, you start to realize, especially getting to have this somewhat bird's eye view in a lot of cases, that how unique and varied all of these different scenes are across the country, and how many interesting things are going on. And just to like zoom back up like one level, some of the things that we've talked about in this conversation is how special it is to see how many like places are doing really cool things in new music, or have people who are consistently putting together shows, putting together, you know, community events, right? All of that kind of stuff. And there's that kind of connotation in the music world that like, oh, if you're not in New York, if you're not in LA, if you're not in Chicago, if you're not in like these major hubs, then like you don't have anything or something. And the placemaking side of me loves working with Live Music Project for this reason, is that there are so many musicians all over the place who are
Yeah.
doing cool things all the time.
Right.
and
Yeah.
and yeah, like it just breaks my heart when people feel like they live in a place that doesn't have a lot going on. And it's mainly because they don't know. It's mainly because the information is blocked,
Right.
and it doesn't spread beyond that first level of like the musician's close connections, right? Or the organization's email list.
Right.
And there's a lot of work to be done there. And it, like I said, it breaks my heart when people feel like they live in places that don't have stuff, right?
Right.
When they do, and it's just because we're not great at being able to get past those barriers when it comes to like marketing budgets, or
Right.
getting past the algorithm, or getting past the, what like what's taking up the media space in your town, right? And like, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm not mad at those things, but that's why I choose to work in this type of way, to do this kind of work, is because we can each be really powerful advocates when we look at some of those problems and go, oh, that's a problem, I can do something
Right.
about that.
And
Like,
sometimes they're like in with the string quartet that I heard, the Arts Council was sponsoring that concert,
yeah,
and they're not a specifically classical music organization. They're not
yeah,
even specifically a music
yeah,
organization. And so some of this is outside their experience, or maybe an outside their marketing
yeah,
ideas, because they're not used to it. And I also think about a lot of this is, if you're out somewhere and you're looking at nature, you see the big trees, right?
yeah,
And you
yep,
think, oh, nothing is happening unless it's this big tree, or other something else that's also obvious because
yep,
it's big. When you say, well, if you dig in the dirt, you'll find that most of the activity is happening down there,
yes, yes,
but,
yes,
but all of that is hidden, it's hidden from sight, so all those small areas, they're still alive, they're
yeah,
teeming with life, but
totally,
we
yeah,
have to zoom in order to see it. And when you get all those feet on the ground, all those volunteers to say,
yeah,
hey, this is happening in my community, then
yeah,
we can put that magnifying lens on it and get to see it and participate.
yes, yes. Heather, perfectly said. Like that's exactly it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know I'm one of those people that thought about starting a calendar website. So
Yeah. Well,
why is this not here? Because of the lack of newspapers, and the arts calendar has really suffered.
yeah,
So yeah, so I thought about that. So I'd much rather definitely contribute to the living live music project, and yeah, do my little bit in my little
yay.
area.
Heather, I love to hear that. I will
Now,
follow up with you.
oh yeah, you'll definitely follow up with me. I'll follow up with you too. One of us will follow up with the other.
Well, and that's so true. I'm so
So
glad you said
this
that.
includes
Yeah.
like academic institution concerts too.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, yes, we cover everything, student recitals through instrument petting zoos that have music included, to, the symphony in town or whatever it is. And so it doesn't, we, the one caveat that we make about that is like that it has to have some performance element to it, right? So it can't just be a lecture, right?
Okay.
Unless it's like a lecture recital, right? Where there's a performance. And so that's when you were asking about like, are there any, stipulations or anything? It's really just like we're directing people to go listen to live classical music, so if it has something like that in as your event, then we're like, put it on the calendar and let us help you tell people about it. So that's where that comes from, is just that is we we know what happens when the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly.
And there are, when we have access to these technology tools that help us do that in a bigger and bigger way, we can't do it without individuals who are all helping, but it ends up having this much larger impact. And Seattle for us has been like such a great example of this, where we started and we've been doing this forever, seemingly. And if you talk to people in Seattle, they're like, of course, I put my concert on Live Music Project all the time, every single time, and like they go check Live Music Project. And it's such a great case study as we try to expand and support more and more communities for what happens when you get to a certain level of comprehensiveness on the calendar. And it doesn't mean that it's all in support of what people are doing. So you're reaching more people. And those things like when people are talking about that coveted new audiences, right? Well, how are they finding you? Like we're and that sense of like, where do you go to get in touch with these people? And that's where we're trying to show up and really create a strong bridge, right? Where that listener focused place. So there's a lot of concert calendars that are kind of like practitioner focused. They're from organizations that are supporting practitioners, but they don't do as much work as we do to reach out to listeners to be like, hey, do you want to go hear more classical music in town? This is a way to find it. So
Yeah.
it's really creating that loop, so more listeners are hearing about what's available to them.
Yeah. I have a quick question that,
Yeah.
do you ask anything from the organizations in return for putting a concert on? Because I'd be like, you should get them to put a little, reserve an advertising spot in there.
Yeah.
Like,
So
find us on Live Music Project.
listen, Heather, I would love that. And you know what? Those are absolutely part of like us growing and being more sustainable as an organization, is having those kinds of partnerships. Like what you're talking about is also like an in-kind trade for their
Yeah.
program books. And that's such a powerful way for them to be like, hey, we've benefited from Live Music Project. And it's, we, if they have the space in their program book and they're not going to be like losing revenue,
Right.
then those things are a win-win, win-win-win all around. And
Yeah.
so those, yeah, all of those kinds of things, super helpful. And one of the key and like core philosophies for Live Music Project is that it's free for everybody, that we're not making an additional cost barrier for the people who need the advocacy that we're providing, right? So a lot of our sustainability comes from the people who find a lot of value in using our site. So they donate to the site,
Yeah.
right? That they are like, hey, this is really important. And like we've really benefited from this either as listeners or as musicians. And they're like, I'd like to contribute to its ongoing health. But then also having ways where other people who have marketing budgets that are not musicians, organizations, ensembles, and listeners, that people who want to be in front of them, right? Like restaurants, parking garages, like all of the stuff that's like around your music listening experience, they get to say, hey, come park in our garage. Like when you go to Benaroya Hall, here's a discount code or whatever. So that is how we also think about continuing to be advocates and supporters of the field. Is I'm not asking the organizations to pay me to market them. I'm asking who else benefits from the arts and culture thriving in these spaces. Well, like, all of these other businesses, all these for-profit businesses benefit when we have concerts, right? When we do this kind of stuff, and they want to put their information in front of concert goers. So those are the kinds of things where, just thinking about sustainability for the organization, I want to make sure that that's the way that we're going, and not asking the self-same people, right? Oh, would you like access to these listeners? Pay us for this thing, right?
Oh
It's like,
no, yeah, no. I hope that they would mention you just because
just because they love us.
they love you. Not to give you money, but say,
Yes.
hey, find us, because I think so many small organizations could ride on the coattails of larger organizations. There's some, especially when the patrons of the large organizations didn't need to use Live Music Project to
Yep.
find, like, the symphony, for
Yep.
example.
Yep.
Everybody knows the symphony's there. But if you go to the symphony and they mention Live Music Project, well, and they're like, well, what is that? And
Yeah.
then they can find all those smaller groups that they didn't know were near them,
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
larger organizations could support the smaller ones just by mentioning a
Yes.
connection with you.
And you're right. And you probably saw this, like, on our values. One of our core values at LMP is resource sharing. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like, that's part and parcel with that idea, which is when we all share just these little bits, it strengthens the entire music community. It
Yes.
strengthens our entire arts and culture scene. And those are always the things that LMP is looking for, to be like, how can we contribute to that? So I love that. Heather, you're already just giving me great ideas.
Yeah, I'm just like, as a composer, I'm like, well, a lot of those smaller organizations are doing new music. And imagine what would happen if the patrons of the symphony went and listened to new music and then they said, hey, orchestra,
Right,
give us
right.
new music.
Exactly, exactly. So, well, and to your point, I love getting to see how this is kind of another point, which is like getting to see so many organizations across the country because of them being on the calendar. Is I get to see some of these, like, larger shifts in programming that are happening, people taking chances on things, people living their values, their organizational values, and how they're programming. And and it gives me pause sometimes, because I'll see our friends on social media be like, none of this is happening. Nobody's doing
Yeah,
this. Nobody, and like, and it, and I agree that we can always do more, but the ability to see and, like, to look at something and see how those shifts are happening has been really meaningful to me, has been really interesting. And then you get to have real conversations with real facts and figures from things. And so
right.
when you start looking at that and you're like, oh, I can point to examples of people who are doing that kind of, like, living their organizational values through their programming more and more, and how it's turning into increased audience sizes, or, increased tickets sold, then that's when you get to have more, like, concrete and real conversations about what does that mean, like. And so I really love getting to have that view, but then it makes me want to push back sometimes and be like, oh, but these people are a good example of what it's like when they're doing that and successful. Or I've seen these people go in the opposite direction of, like, over time. And instead of feeling like the chatter, that you don't have anything to back it up with, you don't have any case studies to back up that feeling that you have of nobody's doing this, nobody's thinking about this, nobody's talking about this. You get to start seeing, actually, there are people that are doing it, they're trying to do more and more of that. How can we help support that kind of work?
Right. Right. It sounds also like there's a general cross-pollination that can happen naturally through
Yeah.
a live music project. So
Well, hopefully, and I think
and the
sometimes, yeah,
organizations can look at what each other's programming too,
yes, that's exactly
without,
what I was going to say.
yeah, and without a lot of effort.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can, it's like a one-stop place to see, as a listener, what's happening, but as an organization, what's happening, what are other groups doing, and
Yeah.
and if they see somebody taking a risk on new music, and they see that hey, that seems to be successful, then they can have confidence to
Yeah.
try it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I just love like that whole information is power idea,
Right.
and that we can all contribute to that together. So yeah. So Heather, thank you so much. This has been such a
Yeah.
pleasure to like talk about all these topics with you.
Yeah, it has been awesome. And I am totally on board with this. So yeah, we'll be talking more about
Yay.
how I will be involved, because like I said, I had already thought about something along those lines.
Yes. See?
So
Yes,
yeah,
I
much
want to
better
help
to
you.
not reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, it is time to wrap this up, and I thank you so much for coming on
Thank
to the
you.
podcast and sharing all the interesting and exciting things you're involved in, and how you're contributing to music and community. So,
Thanks, Heather. Well, and if, I think we dropped a bunch of links and stuff like that, but if anybody just wants to reach out about any of these things that we've talked about, they can always hit me up like on Instagram. I'm at Mezzo Ihnen, Ihnen. And so just drop me a line. If any of these things were like, oh, I want to follow up with her about that thing, I,
yeah.
I definitely encourage people to reach out.
And I will put those things in the show notes. And so all the links to Megan's website and to the live music project and short Instagram and
Yes, yes.
yeah, social media in general. So I will have those links in the show notes. And thanks again, Megan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have been listening to the Musicking Community Podcast with host Heather Nimi Savage. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/the Musicking Community Podcast, where you can get early access to ad-free episodes, video episodes, transcripts, merch, and other benefits for our supporters. You can follow us there for free or become a supporter for as little as $3 a month. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.